This is Tanya Pearson interviewing Phranc on September 19th, 2016 in Santa Monica, California.
Santa Monica, California, yes.
For the Women of Rock Oral History Project. Thank you so much. So this is a personal and professional kind of biography.
Okay.
So I'm going to start at childhood.
Will help remind me who I am.
Yeah,
I love this. Yeah, this is good
Just
for
so
me.
if you can talk a little bit about your childhood, your family of origin, where you grew up, your community.
Okay. Yes. My name is Phranc with a PH and a hard C. I'm your basic average, all-American, Jewish lesbian, folk singer. And I grew up in Mar Vista, California, which is pretty close by. And I started taking guitar lessons when I was 9. And I hated practicing. I have mom, dad, and brother. And pretty early on, I figured out that I was a lesbian. So it was just, trying to get out of the house as soon as I could. So I played guitar. My friend Dante lived across the street, and her parents had, for the time, a very fancy kind of recording system, like the double cassette player in her parents' bedroom. So when they would go out, I would go over to her house, and she would record me, and I would pretend I was giving a concert. And so I did that with Dante. I played the guitar on the lawn of my high school. I raised some hell, and then dropped out of high school to be a lesbian. And what happened was I rode my bike one night. I saw that there was this lesbian feminist drop-in rap happening at the Women's Center on Hill Street down in Venice. And I told my mom I was going to the library, and I rode my bike to this women's center. And I walked in the door, and there were all these women sitting in a circle, and it was this lesbian feminist drop-in rap group. And I sat down. Everyone was like 10 years older than me. I was 17. And they said, so talk about yourself. And so I said, oh, hi. And I'm Sue. That was the name I was born with, was Susie. And I said, and I like chicks. And everybody in the room started going, peep, 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 peep. And I was like, what? I said, so anyway, all the chicks at my high school, and I was like, peep, 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 peep. And I was just like, what is this? And they said, women are not chicks. Chicks go peep, 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 peep. And I was like, oh, this was my first consciousness raising lesson. Anyway, that was a community that ended up really kind of taking care of me. And I couldn't be who I was in my parents' house. And so I left, and I took my guitar, and I went and I lived down in Venice, and I stayed with new friends, and then became part of the lesbian feminist community there that was very politically active. There was sister newspaper. So I got very politically active soon. And it was exciting for me because high school in the 70s, like early 70s, was just very apathetic. Like nobody really cared about anything. Nobody got mad about anything. Nobody did anything. People like smoked pot and went to see Jay Giles. It was just like, and I was listening to folk music. I was listening to protest music. A friend of mine had given me Janis Ian's first record, Society's Child, and I was listening to I wasn't even listening to Bob Dylan yet. I was just listening to my folk records, my Donovan records, my Janis Ian records, and everybody else was listening to rock music, and I wasn't at all. So I was kind of outside there. So then I was very involved in the Women's Center, and I went on something in 1975 called the Lesbian History Exploration. And it was a retreat. It was at Camp JCA up in the mountains near Malibu. And Alex Dobkin played music there. Liza Cowan showed a slideshow, What the Well-Dressed Dyke Will Wear. Elsa Giddens read poetry. Who showed the slideshow of vaginas? It was Betty Dodson showed the slideshow of vaginas orgasming. I'm 17 and my mind is being blown. And I am up in the mountains with all of these incredible women. And I am so inspired. And I changed my name when I was up there because my hair was like down to my waist right before. I cut my hair to my shoulders right before I went. And I went up to the lesbian history exposition, and I changed my name to Phranc when I was up there. I was just inspired on the mountaintop, and I changed my name Franc, like the French Frank. And you had to write your name on your cup, because everybody used the same cup all weekend. So I came home from there, and after seeing Liza Cowan's What the Well-Dressed Dyke Will Wear, I went straight, took the bus to the barbershop, and I cut off all my hair. And I went to visit my friend Pumpkin, and I knocked on her door, and I said, "I'm Phranc." And she said, "Wow." And she just said, "Stay right there." And she went in the other room, and she came back with this blue baseball cap with a P on it. And she put it on my head, and she said, "Phranc, Phranc." So that's how I got my PH. So, yes, that Pickles, that was a very exciting day. Yeah, it's the day I became Phranc. So then I...
Can I go back just a
yeah,
little bit?
ask me questions.
You said that you couldn't really... You didn't come out.
Oh, yeah, I came out to my parents, and they didn't like it. So
Okay,
I
so
left, yeah.
Okay, and that was
Because
why-
I knew I was a lesbian. I had known I was a lesbian since probably before kindergarten.
Yeah.
I was always in love with women, and I was always trying to, I hated wearing dresses. I loved dressing the way I wanted. I would always pretend I was a soldier, marching up the hallway. I would turn on the water in the bathroom so it would make foam and pretend I was, drinking in the saloon. And, I was a young butch trapped in, trapped in a nuclear family. That's a good book, right?
Yeah.
Young butch trapped in a nuclear family. So, I remember when I came out to my parents, they were going on a trip, and I was sitting on a suitcase in their bedroom, like straddling the suitcase, and I told them that I was a lesbian, and they said, "You can't. You don't. No, you're not. You're too young to know. There's no way." And I said, "Well, I am, and then, you can't be that way in our house, And if you told the story to my mother now, she would deny it. She would think she was the most progressive. Their daughter is the Jewish lesbian folk singer. They tell everybody that their daughter is Phranc, and they're Frank's parents, and
Yeah.
and they made the scrapbook. My daughter, the folk singer. Because growing up, I listened to a lot of Alan Sherman. My son,
That's
the
what I
folk
was gonna
singer.
say, too.
Yeah, huge fan of Alan Sherman growing up. So, when I saw Alex Dobkin sing, I was like, yes, this is my lesbian, version here. I was all ready for it. So, yeah, I listened to show tunes and Alan Sherman growing up. A little bit of Peter, Paul, and Mary, a little bit of folk music, a little bit of Broadway. No, you know what? You can't keep yelling, Pickles. I don't know how they're going to transcribe you. I don't know how they're going to transcribe you.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Pickles interrupts again. That's what they're going to say. Pickles interrupts again. All right. So where was I? Oh, so I came out. So then after then, I moved out. And what had happened was there was a friend that lived next door, and he had an apartment in Venice, and he said that I could move in with him. So I just stayed with him. No, you know what? It's not going to work. I'm going to have to cover you. Excuse us.
Okay. Sorry, Pickles.
We'll see if that works, Pi.
And then my other question was,
Yeah.
you started playing guitar at
9.
Did you come from a creative family or a musical family? Like, did your brother play?
My brother was 3 years younger than me. He was not a musical person. He never took any lessons of any kind, really. My grandfathers both played the violin and guitar. And my grandmother, on my mom's side, my grandmother Miriam, was a painter. So she loved oil painting. And she was the one who really made sure that I got an art education. She was the one that took me to museums. She was the one that, took me to art lessons, made sure that, she's the one who made sure I got to travel. I mean, she took me places, really. She wanted to show me the world and show me art and show me how big the world was. And so, but my parents didn't play instruments. So, I mean, guitar was I wanted to play guitar. I took guitar lessons, but, like any kid, well, some kids really want to learn to play the song that's in front of you. But I had really no interest at that time in playing Solitary Man. Just like, really. I just wanted to write my own music. So I learned those chords and started writing my songs, which weren't too great, but they were mine, So, and then I kept doing it. And when I came into the little women's community in West LA, and then later at the Women's Building, I focused on my music. That's what I really did, is I was a songwriter. And where I went from the West Side Women's Center was there were these dances at these women's dances, and they were held at the Women's Building in downtown LA. And I went to one of these dances, and all of a sudden I'm in this huge building. It was, at that time, it was the old Chenard Art Center, off of Grandview in downtown LA, right near MacArthur Park. And it was this huge institution for women, for artists. There's a women's bookstore, Sisterhood Bookstore was in. There was a Dorothy Baker's Coffee House where I could play my guitar. There were galleries. Okay, so the Women's Building was this incredible institution where the Feminist Studio Workshop, which was a program in feminist art, existed. And I had no idea that this place was even there. And I saw women, I saw art. I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So I started going down there. And I eventually enrolled in the Feminist Studio Workshop, and that was the school that I went to. So I dropped out of high school. I was very, political, involved in the women's community. But this was something that I was really interested in. And there was consciousness raising groups, and then you focused on whether it was performance art or drawing or painting, more traditional arts, video, which was pretty new at the time. And I focused on printing. I learned to run an offset press. I apprenticed Cynthia Marsh in the Women's Graphic Center. And so I became a printer, and I worked on my music. And
were you playing acoustic guitar then?
Yeah, I was playing acoustic guitar. And that's kind of where it all started for me. I had, 2 years there, and I had a lot of support, and this great community, and feminist politics. I learned on the West Side, in Venice when I first got involved, the personal is political, and, really taking to heart. It was really an interesting time in feminism, especially lesbian feminism, because it really was a time where they kind of discounted old gay, and new gay was like coming out. When I came out, was all about, everybody kind of wore overalls, and all of the butch femme community was very much discounted when I was coming out, because that was the bar scene. That wasn't, the lesbian feminist community of the progressive one was intellectual and political, and really didn't recognize at that time, my information when I was coming out was, those were just the bar dykes. There was no real appreciation like there is now, like there's coming into the forefront of the whole butch femme culture, and kind of honoring old gay culture. That really didn't exist then. It was just kind of, everything was new. Everything was feminism, so it was different. So the Women's Building was very significant to me, and it was where I really started writing music and performing. And then I graduated from there, and that was the only thing I ever really finished, was my 2 years at the Women's Building. And I went to San Francisco because I wanted to meet, it was supposed to be lesbian Mecca up there, so I thought I'd go to San Francisco. San Francisco, couldn't get a dyke to talk to me, it was like nobody was too friendly. I had been given a couple of phone numbers. I met these women up there that were printers. They were trying to get me a printing job, and they were very nice. And they said, well, we don't know of anything, but we have these wonderful neighbors. And they walked me across the street, and it was this whole loft of punk rockers. And
so it was really an accidental introduction.
yeah,
to
it
punk?
was
So
incredible.
I read that you wanted to be in a band too.
Yeah, that's coming. That's
Okay.
coming up. Yeah. So anyway, I went across the street and I met Joanne, who was this great artist and was like into leather, and Amy was an actress, and Scott was an actor, and Brian was a speed freak, and it was this whole little community, and they were all my age, and they were all excited, and they were artists, and they were angry, and half of them went to school at the Art Institute, and the other half modeled for the Art Institute, and I couldn't get a job up there printing for the life of me. But I could get a job modeling at the Art Institute, being a nude model for the Art Institute. So, I came back down to LA. I packed my boxes and I went right up to San Francisco and I moved in with them. So I lived in this house and had this whole different education because I had really only talked to women because I had become pretty much of a lesbian separatist for a while there. And I hadn't had really any contact with men at all. And all of a sudden, I'm in this world, and there's these leather fags, and I'm loving them, but I'm so conflicted. I kind of don't know what to do with myself because I have all this feminist principle, and yet here I am in this punk rock world with women, but also a lot of guys. So it's kind of confusing for me. It was really different, and I didn't know anybody. Everything was new. So I made very, very good friends up there. My friend Gail DeMartis and Marcus Leatherdale, who went on to be he's still a great photographer. And Penelope and the Avengers played Our Housewarming, and the Mutants played with Sally and Sue. It was a very, very fun time musically up there. And I left San Francisco right before the Sex Pistols came. It was like Elvis died, the Sex Pistols came, and I left right in between. I came back down to LA, and the only people I knew in LA were lesbians, and I was a punk rocker now. So I'd get dressed up and I'd go out to these shows and, try to look cool.
You dressed the part?
I dressed, I'd put on my little suit and tie,
Okay.
and I'd go out and I'd lean up against the wall and try to look cool. I didn't know anybody. I was scared to death. And I went out to this show and I was all dressed and leaning up against the wall, and this guy came up to me and asked me if I wanted to be in a band. He said, "You want to be in a band?" And I was like, "Yeah." Didn't ask me if I could play the guitar, if I could do anything. And I said, "Sure." He says, "Good, it's called Nervous Gender." And it was like kind of perfect. And couldn't be farther away from any idea of music that I had ever had. It was 3 synthesizers that made a lot of noise. Gerardo was a genius, but the lyrics were pretty misogynist. And I was with these 3 wonderful gay men who were angry punk rockers, and we loved getting dressed up and doing these shows. And they loved experimental music and the Screamers, and I knew nothing from experimental music. I know CFG. So I sang. I was kind of the lead singer, and then we'd mix it up, and I got to play the guitar on a couple of songs, and that was kind of the beginning. And then from Nervous Gender, I was in Catholic Discipline, where I played guitar, and then I was in Castration Squad with Alice, and Alice wasn't in it yet, but Shannon.
Well, you came from the women's building and lesbian, feminist, separatist movement. Did you maintain those relationships while you were in the punk scene and playing in a band?
Yes.
Okay.
I did.
They were supportive of...
They were supportive of me.
Yeah.
However, during that period of time when I was in Nervous Gender, we were dealing with the whole violence against women movement. And the Rolling Stones had their black and blue poster on Sunset Boulevard. And there was a lot of activism around violence against women. Like, no surprise, there's more activism now. There seemed to be a lull for a while, but now Alice has written No Means No. So, it's great, but it takes another whole generation for this activism to become visible again. But that's what was going on then. So, in my mind, I just saw all the similarities that the dykes and the punks had. They were both oppressed by all the same people. We both had very progressive ideals. It was about identity, and it was about honesty, and it was about truth, and society, and culture, and class, and all those issues. I thought the dykes and the punks had the same one. So I kept trying to bring everybody together, and they were like, no.
Yeah.
These two worlds could not see their similarities. But I was both. It's interesting because people talk to me about the punk rock world. I had feminism. I had a whole culture, a whole world, a whole education in political education, feminist education, before I came to punk rock, that informed my perspective from where I was. So it was really interesting to be sitting with different people, some of them whose consciousness was very raised and some were not. But to try to bring these two worlds together, I mean, the example was there was a benefit for, I think, the Women's Video Center at the Women's Building. And Nervous Gender played the benefit. Oh. And the plug got pulled at like the second song.
Yeah.
So it's just those two worlds did not really collide. And now, or, within the last 10 years, there's the whole queer punk phenomenon, queercore and all of that, where, everybody finally did come together. But back then they weren't ready yet.
Yeah.
So.
And what did you, as an observer, what did you observe to be women's roles in the punk scene at that time? How did they influence it and contribute to it?
Well, there were a number of very, very strong women that were out there. It had to do with your identity. If you had a strong identity and knew who you were, like I would go to shows. I would see Penelope from the Avengers. I Believe in Me. She would sing, and Alice. I'd go to every bag show because she was such a strong force on stage, just like she is now. If you've seen her now, it was just really empowering to be a woman, seeing other women in front, angry, articulate, creative, on stage at that time. It was just like force of nature. It's just like nothing could be greater. So they totally influenced. And if you look at the broader picture, I mean, Alice is just came out with her new record now, which is influencing culture now. When I went to her show not too long ago, it was all of these young women and then all of us old women. It was like a really good mix of both. I loved it. And there were guys there too. I mean, it was just a really good mix, but the message is the same, So it was a very, very exciting time. And then you look at the Go-Go's, who have influenced pop culture in such a huge way, and they were just gals getting together to play music that were inspired. And the thing was, if you were motivated and you wanted to do it, punk rock was nobody knew how to do anything. Nobody really taught you how to do anything. It was really the beginning of that do-it-yourself movement, which holds up today. If you looked at the maker movement and you look at music now and you look at how people have taken music into their own hands and nobody waits for the record deal anymore. That was very unusual back then, to do everything yourself. But it was a very empowering time.
Did you ever feel like an anomaly within the punk scene? And I'm not sure about this, but you were openly lesbian, gay woman, androgynous presenting person. Were there other... how many other people were like out in the scene? Because I heard that there were a lot of gay people, but not everyone was necessarily.
Well, I've been listening to people talk about all these gay people in the scene now, and it's just like I don't seem to remember any of them. Okay. I don't. Androgyny was extremely popular. Okay. So it was really cool to be androgynous, but there weren't a lot of. I didn't hear a lot of politics, a lot of lyrics, and people being out. Yes, there were people that were gay, but they weren't necessarily out or vocal about it. And there weren't very many of them that I knew. But, there were different circles, and maybe they were there, but the reason that I became so vocal was because, in the beginning, at least in LA, the punk rock scene was very creative, exciting, and welcoming, especially with the women. I mean, it was just kind of great. It was a very, very exciting time. Then it kind of took a little turn and became very aggressive and macho. A lot of guys came in, and the mosh pit got more and more aggressive, and the swastikas came out, and it was all about pissing people off, and then the skinheads came, and all of these other little cultures kind of filtered into our little utopian punk rock world in LA. And it became pretty dark. And I wrote the song Take Off Your Swastika because I just got sick of it. I mean, it was just, that wasn't my world. That wasn't a world that I wanted to be associated with. And, I didn't want to go see Fear play and talk about the faggots and it was the opposite of what I stood for. So I wrote the song Take Off Your Swastika, which is how I returned to the acoustic guitar, because you could hear the words if I played the acoustic guitar. So that was the beginning of really Phranc going solo. That's how I became the all-American Jewish lesbian folk singer. And because when I got on stage, that's when I started introducing myself, when I wrote that song. And that's when I started playing solo with my guitar. And since these were all the same venues that I played with in my bands, and these were all still the same audience, and they were all the same friends, it was still me. It was just me solo playing songs that I wrote on my acoustic guitar. So I play with all the regular bands, but it would be me and my acoustic guitar in the middle of all of that. And then, sometimes people threw shit, sometimes people spit, but most of the time people were really kind of cheered me on. And
well, you put together the folk night.
Yeah, the whiskey. I was going to talk about that because nobody seems to remember that, but I have those old flyers from there. It was John Exene did Jackson, and that was kind of the beginning of the Knitters. That's where the Knitters came from, doing that show. And Tito from the Plugs played, and Keith Morris, Circle Jerks did He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. They all did all these like folk songs, Top Jimmy played. Who else played? Gaza X, and all the local people. And it was just because I was so obsessed with the folk hootenanny culture. I just loved it so much. I thought, this will be so cool. It was before Unplugged or before any of that stuff. So there were 2 nights that we did, folk nights at the Whiskey. And that was a lot of fun. Yeah. And a lot of cool stuff came out of that.
And this is, I saw it for the first time on the big screen, Decline of Western Civilization.
I just saw it recently.
Okay, yeah, there was a screening out where I live. And I was like, I'll go see Alice and Phranc.
So interesting, isn't it, seeing it now?
Because I noticed...
Really interesting.
Well, what you just said about how the punk scene started and then became kind of misogynistic and aggressive. And I also noticed that there weren't many women who had speaking parts.
Oh, did you notice that?
I was like, I don't remember.
They didn't talk to Alice. They didn't talk to me. They talked to Michelle because she was with Darby, and they talked to Exene, but that was it. Mm-hmm. They didn't talk to any other women.
And I thought maybe it's because you said, we were talking about how articulate most of the women in the punk scene are, and I feel like that movie or that documentary just kind of presents the punk scene in a certain way, sort of like idiotic and aggressive.
It does. It documents it fairly well to a certain extent, but I went and I took my partner and one of my daughters, and it was just by the end of the movie, it was so upsetting. Yeah. I was so upset. It was really upsetting to watch the film, and I hadn't counted on that at all. In my mind, I just remembered, I'm going to go see, oh my God, I remember doing this movie, and I guess I'd seen it once before. I saw the premiere, and then I've seen it like once before on like a video, but over 20 years ago, so I hadn't seen it at all. And I found it to be very disturbing. Yeah.
This little
Funny now.
depressing
You,
tidbit.
you are maybe the third or fourth person that
I
I've
was
talked to
surprised.
about it that has had the same reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
invited a friend to come with me who had never seen it, and then I
yeah.
was
You
sort
think
of
it's going to be all
embarrassed
like
yeah.
it's like, oh, this is
I know.
dark.
Okay, so Catholic Discipline, which was in the film, and
Yeah.
then Castration Squad,
Yeah.
which was that your only all female, all woman
Yeah, it
band?
was.
Yeah.
It
And that
was. It was
deliberate.
Castration Squad. Yeah.
obviously.
We were no go-go's. No, we weren't. So the way that the band, like, Shannon was amazing. Shannon Wilhelm. And Mary Batthing. Mary, who's in 45 Grave. And Tracy took my part. And then Alice came in. And then there was Tiffany Kennedy, because she loved the Kennedys. But the way we got our name was Shannon had read this article about the real Castration Squad, which was this bunch of women who found rapists who had not been convicted. So there were all these rapists that would go to trial and then they wouldn't be convicted. So they'd basically be getting away with it. So there was a group, a secret group called the Castration Squad. And they would find these guys and they would kidnap them. And one of the members of the Castration Squad was a doctor. And they would castrate them and they would bandage them and then they would leave them on like the steps of wherever. I mean, they wouldn't hurt them.
Yeah.
They would just take care of business. And they were called the Castration Squad. So Shannon read this article and we love this. She goes, we call ourselves the Castration Squad. It was just like, the songs were not necessarily political. They were emotional and they were fun and they were kind of dark. It was very goth. I mean, we all wore like very white makeup and we wore Castration Squad armbands, CS. We wore black and white. And Shannon was the lead singer, Shannon and Mary, and I played guitar for a short while. And then I think Alice played guitar, bass, I think, and then Tracy played guitar. And one of my favorite Castration Squad songs is called A Date with Jack. I've got a date with Jack. I don't care that he's got a bad back. We'll sleep on a bed with a board underneath. We'll go to Hyannisport, spend the day on the reef. Oh, Jack, you can't have him back. 'Cause I got a date with Jack. This is all about...
That's on YouTube.
Yeah.
An interview with
Yeah.
the band afterwards.
It's pretty great,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's a great song. So, yeah, short-lived days with Catholic Discipline. I mean, with Castration Squad, but love them.
And did you intend on pursuing music as a career? Did you consider yourself a musician or more of an artist? And also, how did you make money or supplement your income? And like,
Okay.
where were you living and what were you doing when you were doing music?
I was living on Normal Avenue in Hollywood, and I was working in a factory silk screening gym clothes.
Okay.
So I was a printer. So that was my job. But I never really had enough money for the rent, even though I had this regular job. And I had a roommate, James Valentine, who was a great artist, and he was working in animation, and I was working at the silkscreen factory. And I would have these little last-minute art shows. I was doing my visual art. I'd always made art, like, from the time of the Women's Building, from the time I was a kid. And I started painting on cardboard because I could find it in the trash, and it was really cheap. So I'd spend the money on the expensive paint on the gouache because it just looked so great. But I'd always work with cardboard because I could always find it. So I'd have these last-minute art sales to try to pay the rent, you know. And so that was, I'd just have people over, and I would just have little paintings in my bedroom. But the visual art, even though I continued to do it, it became less and less because my music kind of took over. And in 1984, my friend Craig Lee, who was in the Bags, and Ethan James, who had Radio Tokyo Studios in Venice, they helped me make my first record. And what had happened was I moved out of Hollywood and I came to the West Side, and I started teaching swimming and lifeguarding, and I saved $1,200 from teaching swimming. And I went into that studio and I made Folksinger my first record. And Phranc, who took a lot of photographs during that time, did a lot of great pictures of X and of all the different musicians. He took the cover photo for Folksinger. I have it here somewhere.
It's a pretty iconic cover.
It's amazing. And, I modeled it on, and I think I have the other cover here too. I'll try to find it. Johnny Crawford from the Riflemen had a record out called Rumors, and it was this beautiful kind of silhouette of him. And I thought, oh, that's great. I want my record to look just like that. So he kind of modeled it on the Johnny Crawford album cover. So Phranc took the cover, and it was the beginning. Whenever I make a record, I make the cover first. Because if the cover looks really good, then you better have something really good to put in it. So I've just taken the photo for my next cover, so I'm working on the music now. So I made Folksinger, and I've been playing music all this time, just at the clubs as Phranc. And I play the Whiskey and the Music Machine, all the local places. And then in 1985, this record came out. I was going to put it out myself, and then Gary Stewart from Rhino Records, who had been going to these shows for all these years, he had seen me. He says, we'll put the record out. And I was like, wow, really? So they put out that, and they had just been putting out novelty records up until then. They just did, they weren't even doing reissues yet. They were Wildman Fisher, and they didn't really sign any new artists. So when they put my record out, I was thrilled. And then when that record came out, I went on a little tour for it, and I opened for the Violent Femmes, and I opened for Husker Du, and I went out and I played with X, even though we were already playing together. I went out, did a little tour with them, and what else? Then I did a little tour with the Knitters, and through the years, and then it came out on Stiff Records in England, and I went on tour with the Pogues. That was kind of wild. So I played all through Europe with the Pogues, and then I made my second record, I Enjoy Being a Girl, and Victor from the Violent Femmes, I recorded it at his house in Milwaukee. And I met Warren Brule, who produced a lot of the Femmes records, and we became good friends. And then he worked with me on Positively Phranc, which was my next record that came out in, I think, 91. And by this time I was touring, and I don't know if it was when I Enjoy Being a Girl came out that Morrissey called me to go out on tour with them. So I went out on tour I went on the Last Smiths tour. I was the opening act for part of that. And then in 91, when Positively Phranc came out, he called me again, and I went out on the Queen is Dead tour. So I've toured like 3 times with Morrissey. So that was really interesting because I played places that were bigger than I had ever played. I was coming out on a stage that was big to like a lot of people, and it was still just me and my guitar doing what I had been doing at the little clubs in LA. And did a lot of press, and it was really, there was nobody out then. Nobody was out and talking about being queer or identity or getting to grow up and be who you were, which was, still my purpose in being out on stage, is that so people can grow up and be who they are. So you don't feel like you're the only one in the world. And I know the world is changing pretty quickly now. It's kind of exciting, that in our lifetime, the perspective in the world has become broader, So it's exciting. But back then, and people always ask me, many times when I'm interviewed, do you feel like you were discriminated against because you were a lesbian back then? This is before Melissa was out. Nobody was out. And never with the audiences. I feel like there were probably some pretty big bumps to get over with programming, with radio. Like I never really broke through, but I don't know how hummable I would have been if I, as far as radio. But
what about like promoters and sound guys?
Well, sound guys and promoters, like when I was doing the shows, everybody was great. In fact, Island was pretty remarkable in the way that they supported I Enjoy Being a Girl. I mean, they went kind of above and beyond it. That record, I should hold it up because it's a visual thing, but they made this promotional kit. They put like $10,000 into the promotion of that record. And what they did is, and I have them upstairs, I should bring one down and show it to you because that's something that really is an archive object. They made a hat box with red and white stripes around the edges, a white hat box with a pink ribbon, and red ribbon, and imprinted on the ribbon was "Phranc, I enjoy being a girl. Phranc, I enjoy being a girl," all the way around. And then you opened up this hat box, and there was pink tissue paper inside, and there was a refrigerator magnet in the shape of a refrigerator that said "Phranc." There was the CD. This was to go out to all the record stores and to the radio promoters. There was the CD where I'm wearing this red turtleneck and I have this glass of milk. Then there was this like 1950s glass, like the glass for the glass of milk, and printed on the glass was "Phranc." And then in the glass was a packet of powdered milk. Wow. Then there was this pink powder puff, like a powder puff, a pink powder puff, and on the powder puff were these two pins, badges. One said, "Let's talk Phranc," and the other one said, "Phranc, I enjoy being a girl." So this was the package that came to record stores, promoters, and radio stations. And I think it's one of the all-time greatest promotional items ever made. And it broke down a lot of doors for me. I mean, any door that could be broken down, I think that really helped. And then, I met with lots of people. I did all the press. I did my job. And I was doing really, really well. 91, Positively Phranc came out. We did little Edmund Scientific pop-up buttons that said "Pop out and get it." We did like a little promotional thing for that. And that tour had just started. I had done all of Europe with Morrissey and done most of the tour here. We were in Boston. We were going to play Madison Square Garden in 3 days. And I was on the radio in Boston promoting the show at Great Woods that night. And I got a call, and they took me and they said, "Oh, there's a call for you." And I went off the air, and I went in the back room, and it was my father calling me to tell me my brother had been murdered. And everything just stopped. It just stopped. And that was just it. I flew home that afternoon, and I dealt with, my brother's burial and my parents, and, Morrissey kept calling me to come back to the tour, and I just couldn't do it, and it was just devastating. And then they kept calling, asking me to come back to the tour, and at one point, I don't know how much time had passed, but I did try to go back to the tour. I went back, and they were doing some shows to finish in London, around England. And I went back, and I think I did maybe 4 or 5 shows. And it just felt ridiculous. In the emotional realm of, like, where I was, to be standing on stage and having all these people clapping, like, who cared? It was just... and I came home and I just couldn't perform. I just didn't want to be in front of anybody. I didn't want to do anything. I dealt with my brother lived in San Diego, and I had to clear out his house and take care of all that stuff. And my parents were pretty immobilized, and it was just us. It was just the 4 of us. So now there were just 3 of us. It was just me and my parents. And it was a really, really difficult time. And I couldn't really do very much, and people said, well, I had a whole world. I had a manager, I had a business manager, I was working. And when you stop working, people stop working for you. because you're not working, which it took me a long time to really realize that, because I was just so lost in grief and then resentment and then anger. And but something kind of magical happened during that time. And I was over visiting a friend at 18th Street Arts Center, which is this great arts community that just, it's in Santa Monica. It's like 18th and Olympic. And there's a theater there called Highways, and I had played music there. I had done these little shows there. And they said, Phranc, there's this studio coming up. And I had a friend, Jill Burnham, who was running the art center at the time. And she took me into this room, and it was this animation studio had this room. It was like 600 square feet. It was all black, and the windows were blacked out. There was the huge camera had been in the middle of the room, so there was this very high ceiling. And she said, we've got this space. Would you like it? And I was like, wow, really? She was like, yeah. And you could make art. You can, do what you love to do here. And I said, yeah. And I had a friend come in. She was a painter. She painted the whole place out white for me. And I took everything off the windows. And that became my art studio. And I started painting again. And it was great because I had a way to be creative. And I didn't have to be in front of anybody. And that was the beginning of the Cardboard Cobbler. That was really the beginning of my whole, second career as a visual artist. And I never had to stop doing what I do. It was just another part of me. And then I was painting everything two-dimensional like I had been, way back in the day, with the cardboard from the alley. And they dropped the LA Weekly, which is the local magazine, off, ironically, in the parking lot of 18th Street Arts Center. And guess what's in between every flat of LA Weeklies? The most perfect slab of cardboard. So I'd go over there on Thursdays when they drop everything off, and I'd kind of hoard the cardboard, and I'd say, do you have any cardboard for me? And they go, yeah, Phranc, it's over here. And I'd take my stack and I'd kind of squirrel it back to my studio, and I'd paint. And then somebody gave me a glue gun, and I made everything three-dimensional. And then eventually I learned to sew, and I started sewing paper and cardboard. And it's just kind of evolved, and I became the Cardboard Cobbler because I decided I was going to make 100 pairs of cardboard shoes. I made I think 20, but it was exciting. And then I started showing my art just in my studio, and eventually, I think it was 94, I wanted to go back on stage again. So I had to figure out how I was going to make my way back on stage. And I can't remember how this, I think I was talking to Holly Hughes, who I was with at the time, and I was joking about the song Solitary Man, the Neil Diamond song. And she says, well, you should do that song. And I was like, yeah. And then somehow Hot August Phranc came out. And I thought, yeah, I could go back on stage as Hot August Phranc. Because I have to go back on stage with humor. I had to kind of trick myself to getting back on stage. So I put together a band, and I started performing Hot August Phranc. I got a wig, had a costume made, and I put together this show. And basically I did Neil Diamond covers, and I had Phranc as the opening act. So Phranc would open for Hot August Phranc. And I did it here, but then I did it in New York at Dance Theater Workshop, and it was this huge hit. People just went crazy. They threw their underwear. It was it was amazing, and it was the funnest way to get back on stage again. And so that was how I got back on stage. And then since then, after that, I think after Hot August Phranc, I was in San Francisco at the Women's Building, and I saw this show called Q-Tip, Queers Together in Punkness, and Team Dresch was playing, and the Bucktooth Varmints, and I can't remember who else was on the bill that night, but I had my breath taken away. It was just like seeing the Avengers or Alice. I was excited. It was years later, and here was this energy again, and this smart political articulation with humor and just fierceness, and dykes, and I just went crazy. And so I met them, and through them, I met Slim from Kill Rock Stars, and I wanted to make this record, this EP, Goofy Foot, and Slim said, yeah. So I put out Goofy Foot on Kill Rock Stars, and
there were a lot of collaborations on that record, right?
Yeah.
Patty played on that.
Patty played on. That's when I met Patty. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that was the first
That's when
time
I
you
met Patty.
her.
Yeah, we have somebody to play on this, Patty, and Madigan Shive sang on it. I think she brought Patty. I can't remember how Patty came in, but she plays on Ode to Billy Joe and Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter. And what else was on there? Yeah, and then Donna played on the record, Toby played on the record, and so it was kind of exciting, you know. And then I made a record myself after that called Milkman where I wrote song. I put it out myself, and I don't know how good of I don't think that's ever really a good idea. I learned my lesson. And using my own money, taking out a loan, trying to make my own record, and it was just, you know, it didn't really get promoted. It didn't really get out there, and it's really hard to do everything all by yourself. But that's how you learn not to do it all by yourself.
So the major label, your relationship with them ended when.
Island dropped when I got dropped by Island when my brother died. Only because, you know, and everybody else, because like I said, what I've come to learn now, 25 years later, is that I stopped working. Yeah. Which is really hard to see when you're in it, you know. As real and logical as it might seem, like you'd say, well, of course you stopped working, so nobody wants to employ somebody that's not working. But when you're a musician and you think, this is me, like, why? Why would, you know, like, boo-hoo, you know. But yeah. So what I really know now, all these years later, is that, like, if I stopped, I can start. Mm-hmm. So now I want to make my new record. I want my new record to come out when I'm 60, which will be next year. I'll just turn 59. So it's pretty exciting.
Happy birthday. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I have a few questions, because after, like, 98, then I got, you know, like, what have you been doing? Where did you go? I read an interview with San Francisco Bay Times in 1990 that you said you got really sick from partying and drugs and went back to college.
And well,
but I wasn't sure, like, what year that was.
Yeah.
This was
okay,
after.
so I'll tell you when that was. That wasn't
Okay.
that wasn't then. That was when I made folksinger. Like
that was so
way back.
Punk, your
punk
career
my punk career and folksinger coming out. The whole community got a little. I mean, it got pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. People that were still around were pretty. Either you were becoming straight edge or you were pretty strung out, and I was pretty strung out. And what I had done is I had just replaced everything with sports. You know, I lived on Normal Avenue right across from LA City College, and you know, I went to the doctor because I was so sick, and he said, well, you're going to die. You know, I had hepatitis, and he said, if you don't take care of yourself, and you have to stop taking drugs, and you have to stop, you know, drinking, and you have to stop, you know, you have to get healthy, you have to start eating, you have to, you know, to exercise. So obsessive. I went across the street to LA City College, and I found the best looking gym teacher, and I signed up for every class she taught. I took badminton and swimming and tennis, and I got really healthy really fast. And then I was on the badminton team, and there was a better badminton team in Santa Monica at Santa Monica College. So I came out to Santa Monica to play badminton, and they had discontinued the badminton team. So I went out for the swim team. Mm-hmm. So when I went up for the swim team, I just filled everything with swimming. And so my song, One of the Girls, comes from being on the swim team. And that's Santa Monica College is where I taught swimming and where I lifeguarded and where I made the money to make folksinger.
Okay.
So I still, you know, like, all of my worlds kind of blend together. They don't necessarily, people don't see each other, but I see everybody from all of my worlds. I see people from the Women's Building. I see people from my feminist time in Venice. I see people from my punk rock world. I see people from my swim team. I see people from the art world now. I see people from 18th Street. So I still have all the same friends. I just don't see them all very often, but it's nice now that people are really coming back together. Like there's kind of a lot of reunion stuff. Like
Yeah. A lot of that's happening.
I just had my kindergarten reunion, so it's the only reunion I ever really wanted to go to was my kindergarten reunion because that's the only good time in my life really was school was elementary school. After 6th grade, it really went downhill. So
I also read in that interview that when you would go into music stores, you would move your albums, if the music store had your albums, and move them to the pop section.
Yeah.
And that kind of
out of the
you
folk
mentioned
into
that
the
you feel,
rock.
pigeonholed
Yeah.
as like as a lesbian or as just a folk singer. And that
Yeah.
seems
Well,
like-
I'll give you what I have these nail files that we had made when I was at Island, and it said, "I enjoy being a girl, file under rock." So we were always trying to get me into the rock section, so because nobody would go to the folk section then. There was no acoustic scene. There was no, if you were in the folk section, no one was ever going to see you.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that you didn't want to be aligned with folk music.
No, because I've always said I was a folk singer, because folk
Yeah.
singers are great.
Yeah.
They tell stories, they document history. I mean, that's the kind of folk singer I am. And, by the way, the All-American part is if you're an All-American in sports, that means you're the top 12 in the country. So if you're the All-American Jewish lesbian folk singer, I'm hoping that I'm in the top 12.
Yeah, I hope so. But so it's more about accessibility.
Yeah,
Okay, than anything
absolutely.
else. Okay.
Because no one would ever see you if you were in
Yeah.
the folk section then.
Bum, bum, bum.
And then I've left out my Tupperware window, haven't I?
I have
Yeah.
that in here.
Okay.
I'm like, because you've already answered a
See,
lot of
when was
questions.
Tupperware?
Yeah.
Where did that fit in there?
That was very random.
That
I saw when you
was
started.
90. That was after. Was that? That was like during Milkman, after Goofy Foot. Like it was right in that time period.
So you were selling Tupperware while you were still performing as Phranc?
Always. And I sold Tupperware as Phranc.
Yeah?
I was the all-American Jewish lesbian folk singing surfing Tupperware lady.
Okay.
Welcome to the Tupperware party! Hey, I'm your Tupperware lady, yeah. I'm your Tupperware lady, ooh. I'm your Tupperware lady, yeah. I'm your Tupperware lady. You can buy it from me. It's got a lifetime guarantee against chipping and breaking, cracking and peeling. So if you're feeling like you're a square, how's it go? Buy some Tupperware from me. You Tupperware lady, oh yeah. I love Tupperware, baby. I'll show you how to microwave, crystal wave, rock and serve, crystal wave. I can't remember all the words. I thought I was gonna burst into rock and serve, crystal wave. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I mean, it's very impressive.
So hey, get some Tupperware, baby, from me. You Tupperware lady. Let's get started. And then I do the Tupperware spiel.
And so you stopped selling Tupperware because I read something like you said they didn't appreciate your.
Well, Tupperware, I think, loved me because they loved anyone that's a top salesperson.
Yeah.
And I was one of the top salespeople in Tupperware. And the way I started doing Tupperware is like my first daughter came and I didn't want to go on tour. I wasn't touring a lot, but the only way you could really promote a record was to go out. And I needed to get a job. And it was kind of a joke. And I said, oh, okay, I'll sell Tupperware. And I looked it up in the phone book and I found the Tupperware office and I went over there. And they were like, whoa. Because people usually recruit you at a Tupperware party. But no, I just walked in the door. And I said, I want to sell Tupperware. And they were like, really? Come sit down. And they told me all about Tupperware. And I loved it because it was just beautiful. And it, it looked like, and then you have all these memories of Tupperware parties from my mom and the little Tupperware keychains. And it's a good deal because it was like, I think less than $100 to buy my sample kit, but you could have a party that would pay for that. And I just started calling people up, and then my friend Rocky Peterson had a party, and her girlfriend at the time, Lisa Udelson, said, "This is incredible. I want to document your first year selling Tupperware." And so she made this movie called Lifetime Guarantee, Phranc's Adventures in Plastic. And she followed me with her camera my whole first year selling Tupperware. And I have a copy of it. You could see it, but it was never released. I don't know if it was because of permission or whatever, but it's all my music. And it's this incredible documentary. It shows me going to Kissimmee to the Tupperware Jubilee, getting my award on stage. And then I trained these two incredible drag queens that are still the top sellers today, Dixie Longate and Quesadilla. And they both are top Tupperware salespeople today in the nation. Yeah.
I can't believe that documentary hasn't been released.
It's a really good documentary, and they're really amazing, and they're still top sellers. And I stayed, I kept my toe in it for a long time, but then, people just saw me as I was just the Tupperware lady. Oh, you're the Tupperware lady, right? It was like, you're the Tupperware lady. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm Phranc. And they go, yeah, but you sell Tupperware. I was like, I know you sell Tupperware. And I was like, yeah, I do. Yeah, sell Tupperware. It was cool. But, I was doing all the things that I did on stage in people's living rooms and kitchens. Just raising consciousness. I'd play a few Phranc songs. I'd open with my Tupperware lady song, which I kind of sure wish I'd played it perfectly for you for your archive. But I'll remember it. Crystal Rock and Serve, Crystal Wave. I can't remember that verse. It's driving me nuts. But I did it for a long time. And then I just kind of slowly stopped doing it. I stopped. It's a lot of work. But I made a lot of money when I did it. It was like amazing. I do like 3 or 4 parties a week, and make a couple $1,000s per party, but then it changed, and part of the beginning of Tupperware was so magical because nothing had changed from the 50s. There were these rallies that you'd go to every Monday night, and all the women, it was just like the women's building. It was just all women. It was all women. And one drag queen. There was one drag queen back then he was amazing. He never got any credit for now there's drag queens everywhere all over the world that sell Tupperware. But back then he was the only one. It was just this women's community that was just special. It was all these different women, every size and shape and kind of woman in this Tupperware rally room. And all the excitement, they'd show the new product, and then there'd be it was like a contest, see who had sold the most that week. So they'd go, 100, 200, 3, and they'd clap, and then you'd go to the front, and then you'd get Tupperware. So we had even more Tupperware. You'd get Tupperware as a prize for selling Tupperware. And at that time, you could just go sell as much Tupperware as you could, and then you do your orders at the end of the party. People would come up, and you just go through all the paperwork and order all their stuff for them. And then you drop the orders off at the office. And they would process them. And then you'd come and pick up all the stuff, all the orders, and you would take them to the hostess's house or the company or wherever you had the party, and you drop them off. And then they would sort through all the stuff there. The hostess would be in charge of separating well, that changed while I was at Tupperware because the internet came along. And all of a sudden you were responsible for entering your own. And it became very much independent. And the community of Tupperware just kind of went like this. All of a sudden there weren't, what do they call them? They didn't call them directors then. They called them distributors. The distributors became directors. Everything became more independent. And so this community kind of dissipated. Mm. And you wouldn't see everybody every week because there wouldn't be a rally because they didn't distribute the Tupperware anymore. It was shipped directly to your house or it was shipped directly to the Tupperware lady, and then I would do it. But in the old days, I'd pick it up and I'd put it in the back of my station wagon. And I love making uniforms. I love uniforms. So I had a whole uniform that I made. It said Phranc, was like a gas station uniform. It said Phranc and it said Tupperware lady. Then I had my badge and I had all my little Tupperwares hanging off of that. And I had a Tupperware apron that I wore on top of that. And then I had my bow tie. I mean, I had my whole get up to go do my Tupperware parties. And when I delivered, I had like this delivery man jumpsuit that I'd put on so that I would drive up and I'd be in my uniform, my delivery uniform. So it was really, really fun. It was great, and I made money, and then I decided I just really wanted to, my visual art started taking off, and I started performing again, and then once again things were kind of rolling. And then 5 years ago, it was almost 5 years ago, I almost lost this arm to a dog. A pit bull got me. And then I had to have major surgery and everything. It was almost the end there. But everything works good now. And I just played my first concert in May. My first full concert at McCabe's. So,
and you
first
have
concert in 6 years.
2 kids.
2 daughters, yeah.
2 daughters, yeah. And you've been with your partner for a long time.
20, we just celebrated 20 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
What's it like being a parent?
It's a wild ride. It's a wild ride. It's great,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been kind of a great experience for me. I never thought I would be a parent. I'm adopted. My daughters are adopted. Mm-hmm. And, I feel lucky. It's interesting, it's not all these wonderful surprises in my life have happened, and being a parent has been one of them. And it's always exciting and kind of wonderful.
And just a few questions in closing. How do you feel about your role in your contribution to rock history?
Rock history, wow.
Yeah, in general.
Wow.
Yeah.
The fact that you're even asking me this question. My role in rock history.
The reason I'm doing this project is because I think that there are a lot of people who aren't, it's not a very inclusive history as it exists. Right. Rock media scholarship, academia.
Right. That's very true, but there's lots of women that haven't been recognized in music in general, I want to really tip my hat to somebody, not just outside of rock music. It would be Alex Dobkin, who, I listened to when I was 17, and she was so political and sang so beautifully and made all of her own records when she wasn't part of the whole women's music scene in Olivia Records, which was another whole world of women's music, She was lesbian music, and that was very, very, very political and not always widely accepted. But it really wasn't made for everybody. It was made for us, And but she was there, when I came out, and that's what I heard, And she's someone that I never see recognized. Nobody who goes and interviews Alex Dobkin, and she's got a great autobiography that she wrote. God, it's here. I wish I could just rattle the name off. But it's tremendous because she grew up during McCarthyism and, communism and those politics. And, and then she also grew up in, when she was married, they owned the Gaslight, which is where Bob Dylan played his first concert, where all the folkies played in the Village in New York. And so that's a whole history that I think the bigger role never seems to get out. I'd love to have her recognized. And I just think she's so smart and has such an interesting historical perspective on women in music, especially lesbians in music. It's really interesting to me. But so how do I see myself? I don't know. I know that there weren't very many people out then. I feel very good. I feel very good when people come up to me and say, you know, you came out as a lesbian. I was 15, and somebody just said this to me recently and almost made me cry. She said, I was at a Smiths concert. I was in a Morrissey concert, and I was 15, and you came out on stage and said you were a lesbian. And I was like, wow, you were the first one I ever saw. And I was like, wow, guess I did my job. You know? So it's not that I wouldn't do it any differently, you know. And I think it's great that more people are standing up and just saying who they are, because I think it really it helps to change the world. It makes the world better for all of us, you know. When we are our true selves, it makes the world better for everyone, you know. So I don't know how I see myself in the grand scheme of things, but I feel very, very fortunate that I can still play. I still get to make art. I still get to participate. I still get to go out and see music. I mean, wow. I mean, how lucky am I, right? Right, Pickles? Yeah.
Well, I think that's about it. Unless
Did I
there's
answer all the
anything that you feel
questions?
Yeah. If there's anything you want to add?
I don't feel like I really got rolling until the last 3 minutes, but...
No. Oh, no, the whole thing was good, and then the Tupperware song was just...
God,
and
I was like, why can't I play the whole song for you? I was
You
gonna...
can do like a take two. We'll just keep
That's
it
it.
rolling.
Rock and serve, crystal wave. Wait. There's a recording of it somewhere.
Yeah.
God. So if you're feeling like you're a square, I don't know.
I mean, I thought it sounded really good. Anyway,
It sounded really good until I forgot the words. God, that was such a good line too. Show you how to rock and serve, how to whatever.
Okay.
Peekaboo. Anyway, you got everything you need?
Yeah,
All right.
I think so. Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Good. Yes, Pickles.